For centuries, the names of emperors such as Augustus, Nero, or Caligula have dominated the narratives of the ancient Roman Empire. Their conquests, their excesses, their madness, all have been etched into collective memory. But behind these powerful men, there were figures just as influential, whose stories were hidden or diminished by official history. One of them, perhaps the most decisive, was Livia Drusilla, the wife of the first emperor and the mother of the second. She was not only the first Empress of Rome. She was a strategist, a mother, a counselor, the matriarch of a dynasty, and, according to some, a ruthless manipulator. Today we will travel to the very heart of Roman power, to uncover 35 things you probably didn't know about the woman who pulled the strings behind the throne, the empress who shaped the destiny of the most powerful empire of her time. Livia Drusilla was born on January 30, 59 BC, into the heart of Rome's republican elite. Her lineage was no ordinary one. Her father, Marcus Livius Drusus Claudianus, was a senator and a member of an ancient branch of the Livii, a clan with centuries of influence. Her mother, Aufidia, also came from a wealthy family. Livia grew up surrounded by marble, politics, and tension. Her house was not just a home, it was a hub of intrigue, speeches, and decisions that shaped the future of the Republic. The Rome of her childhood was a city in turmoil, temples crowded with worshippers, forums buzzing with rumors, and a senate divided between those who dreamed of preserving the old republic and those who saw in Julius Caesar the dawn of a new and inevitable order. In this environment, young Livia learned to observe in silence, to read gestures more than words, and to understand that stability was nothing but an illusion in a Rome ruled by conspiracies and ambition. From an early age, she lived surrounded by privilege, yes, but also by uncertainty. Her days unfolded between the traditional education of noblewomen, weaving, basic rhetoric, religion, and the growing tension of a country on the brink of collapse. She was observant, discreet, always attentive, as if from childhood she already sensed that one day she would have to make decisions capable of changing the course of history. At the age of 16, Livia was given in marriage to her cousin, Tiberius Claudius Nero. He was an experienced politician, much older than her, tied to the most traditional circles of the Republic. The marriage, as was customary among Rome's elites, was not an act of love but of calculation. The goal was to strengthen alliances, secure protection, and keep the bloodline anchored in power. For Livia, it was the first step into a life where the personal and the political would always be intertwined. But the marriage had barely been sealed when the world changed overnight. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March. With his death, the Republic split in two. On one side stood the conspirators, led by Brutus and Cassius, on the other, the heirs of the new order, Mark Antony and young Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. Livia, pregnant with her first child, found herself caught between family loyalties and the brutal reality of a civil war that spared neither women nor children. Her husband, Tiberius Claudius Nero, chose the side of the assassins. He supported the Republican cause, even though it was doomed. When the forces of Mark Antony and Octavian defeated the conspirators at the Battle of Philippi, Livia's family was marked as enemies of Rome's future ruler. Her father committed suicide, and she, with a newborn son in her arms, was forced to flee. Together with her husband and their infant son Tiberius, who would one day become emperor, she went into exile in Greece. There, far from Rome, in an atmosphere of instability, Livia learned that surviving in a man's world was an art. Safety could vanish overnight, and loyalty was a coin that changed hands quickly. During that forced exile, Livia forged the resilience that would later make her the most powerful woman in the empire. In 39 BC, after years of uncertainty and exile, Livia returned to Rome. The temporary truce between Octavian and Mark Antony offered a fragile hope of stability. But what awaited her in the capital was not simply the continuation of her former life, but the beginning of a destiny that would alter the course of Roman history. Soon after her return, Livia and her husband were summoned to an audience with Octavian. It was then that something unexpected happened. The future emperor was utterly captivated by her. It was not mere physical attraction, although Livia was considered elegant and noble in bearing, but rather an immediate fascination. Octavian, the young politician determined to rule Rome, saw in Livia not just a beautiful woman, but someone with poise, intelligence, and moral stature. Both were already married. Livia was still expecting a child with her husband. Octavian, for his part, had a pregnant wife. But none of that mattered. What followed was one of the boldest scandals of the time. Tiberius Claudius Nero, her husband, publicly announced his decision to divorce her, without explanation. Did he act on his own will, or under Octavian's pressure? That will never be known for certain. What is clear is that no man dared defy Caesar's heir. The extraordinary happened soon after. Shortly after giving birth to her second son, Livia married Octavian. And it was her ex-husband, the very man who had been displaced, who gave her away at the wedding ceremony. That scene, more fitting for a tragedy than a political chronicle, marked the beginning of one of the most enduring and influential alliances in imperial history. More than a romantic bond, the union between Octavian and Livia was a political partnership of equals. He saw in her more than beauty, a lucid, thoughtful companion, capable of handling intrigue and maintaining control in the midst of storms. She, for her part, knew how to navigate the dangers of the court and position herself at his side without overshadowing him, but also without fading into the background. Thus Livia Drusilla slowly became the invisible figure supporting the most powerful man in Rome. And the best, or the most dangerous, was yet to come. When Octavian officially received the title of Augustus in 27 BC, Rome left behind its republic to become an empire. And with that, Livia ceased to be simply his wife and became, without precedent or official title, the first Roman empress. There was no ceremony, no crown, no legal recognition of the role, but everyone knew who she was. Unlike other noble women of her time, Livia did not confine herself to domestic duties or remain in the shadows as a mere ornament of power. Her intelligence, discretion, and composure quickly placed her in a unique position, the only person Augustus truly trusted. In a world filled with conspiracies, betrayals, and senators hiding daggers beneath their togas, Livia was the emperor's sole political and emotional support. The historical records do not show her giving speeches or enacting laws, but her influence was constant. Augustus consulted her in private before making crucial decisions. He entrusted her with names, suspicions, alliances, and fears. Livia became the invisible strategist of the empire. While men debated in the Senate, she was weaving networks of power from within the palace. She was, as some chroniclers would describe her, the only man in Augustus' court who did not wear a toga. Her role was not only intimate but also symbolic. Always dressed in simple garments, without ostentation, Livia was presented to the people as the ideal of the Roman matron, modest, disciplined, prudent. While many women of the elite fell into scandals or excesses, Livia was synonymous with virtue, order, and balance. Yet beneath that polished and controlled image lay a strategic, determined mind, ready to maneuver so that her bloodline would remain on the throne at all costs. Thus, while Augustus consolidated the empire abroad, Livia secured their dynasty at the very heart of power. From the moment Livia became the wife of Emperor Augustus, her ambition ceased to be personal and began to focus on the future of her lineage. Although she could not give Augustus children, she had 2 sons from her first marriage, and one of them, Tiberius, became the target of her dynastic strategy. But Tiberius was no ordinary man, nor a politician hungry for power. He was introspective, reserved, and deeply uncomfortable with the spotlight of public life. His ideal existence was far removed from the intrigues of the Senate and the conspiracies of the Palatine. Still, Livia had other plans. She knew, if she could not extend her power through a child born to Augustus, then she would shape Tiberius into the legitimate heir. To do so, she began by severing the ties that bound him to a simple life. Her first victim was Tiberius' happy marriage to Vipsania Agrippina. It was a union based on affection, far from politics, and they were expecting a child together. But Livia pressed. She insisted. She pulled strings at court and in Augustus' heart until the young man was forced to divorce. And not only that, she pushed him into marrying Julia, Augustus' own daughter, a woman with a tarnished public reputation and a character wholly incompatible with Tiberius. What followed was an emotional spiral of bitterness. Tiberius, despite his loyalty to duty, never forgot that maternal betrayal. His life with Julia became a chain of misfortunes, quarrels, infidelities, emotional emptiness. He lost his newborn son. And when he could no longer endure it, he fled. He went into voluntary exile on the island of Rhodes, far from power, his mother, the empire, and himself. While Tiberius wasted away in Rhodes, consumed by disillusion and resentment, Livia placed her hopes in her other son, Drusus. Unlike his elder brother, Drusus was charismatic, brave, and ambitious. He had that inner fire that turned ordinary men into legends. His military career was flawless, and his rise through the ranks of the army made him respected by both troops and the people. Livia, always astute in measuring men's potential, saw in him the possibility of a new legacy. Augustus admired him too, and publicly favored him, feeding hopes that Drusus might become the next emperor, or at least the architect of a new generation of Roman leaders. But fate had other plans. In 9 BC, during a military campaign in Germania, Drusus suffered a fall from his horse that caused severe internal injuries. Despite efforts to save him, the general died far from Rome, amid the mists of the Rhine. The news devastated Livia. Her favored son, the young man who could have redeemed her failures with Tiberius and secured the imperial legacy, was gone. Her grief was deep, intimate, and silent. For the first time in years, the most powerful woman in Rome saw herself simply as a mother, and as a broken one. Drusus was brought back to Rome with full honors. His body, escorted by his legions, traveled down the Via Appia as a symbol of glory and loss. The people mourned their hero. Augustus praised him as the son he had always wanted. And Livia, through her tears, reaffirmed her mission: if Tiberius was all that remained, then she would carry him to the throne, even if she had to shape his destiny with her own bare hands of power. After decades of rule, reforms, wars, and the consolidation of the empire, Augustus' body began to fail him. In his final years, he spoke little, often isolated himself, and maintained contact with the outside world only through letters, almost always addressed to Livia. The couple who had shaped Rome for half a century shared their last days in the silence and complicity of those who had ruled the world together. When death finally came for the emperor in AD 14, Livia was at his side. Not as an empress, nor as a political symbol, but as a companion. She cared for him, accompanied him, and was the sole witness of his last words. And it was she who, according to some accounts, chose to delay the official announcement of his death, just long enough for her son Tiberius to return from Rhodes and assume power without obstacles. The moment was critical. Tiberius did not want the throne. Not only was he embittered by the life his mother had forced upon him, the separation from his wife, the imposed marriage to Julia, the constant pressure, but he also bore a profound resentment for never having had the freedom to choose his own destiny. His relationship with Livia was tense, cold, marked by unspoken reproaches and wounds that never healed. And yet, Rome needed an emperor. The Senate acclaimed him, the people looked to him with expectation, and Livia had already moved the pieces to ensure her son would be Augustus' legitimate successor. Thus, between institutional pressure and the looming shadow of his mother, Tiberius accepted. Reluctantly, yes, but he accepted. Livia, for her part, emerged from mourning with more power than ever. Thanks to Augustus' will, she was officially adopted into the imperial family under the name Julia Augusta, consolidating her status as matriarch of the empire. From that moment on, she would not only be remembered as the wife of the first emperor, but also as the mother of the second. But the tension with Tiberius would only continue to grow. The death of Augustus did not bring only imperial mourning. It also awakened a persistent unease among many senators, members of the elite, and chroniclers of the time. Had Livia had something to do with it? During the last years of Augustus' reign, many of the closest candidates for succession had died under suspicious circumstances. Gaius and Lucius Caesar, Augustus' grandsons and favorites to inherit the throne, died young and under strange conditions. Agrippa Posthumus, Julia's youngest son, was also eliminated shortly after the emperor's death. For some, this was not a series of coincidences but rather a systematic elimination of rivals orchestrated by Livia, with the sole purpose of clearing the path for her son, Tiberius. The poet Ovid, and historians Tacitus, Cassius Dio, and Suetonius, all with varying degrees of animosity toward imperial power, hinted in their writings that Livia might have poisoned her husband. According to these accounts, she manipulated the date of his death, delaying the official announcement while sending urgent messages to Rhodes, where her son was, to ensure that he would arrive before anyone else in the Senate. The theories were numerous and multiplied in the palace corridors. Some said that Livia had used poisoned figs, others that Augustus had simply fallen ill from old age, and that the most powerful woman in Rome had merely taken advantage of the situation, without necessarily having caused it. What is certain is that the image of a manipulative, calculating Livia, willing to do anything for her lineage, gained strength over the years. She was no longer seen only as the loyal wife or discreet advisor, but as a political figure in her own right, ready to use whatever means necessary to achieve her goals. And in a Rome accustomed to intrigue, this was not unusual, but it was unforgivable when it came from a woman. Since then, Livia's image has oscillated between devotion and suspicion. Was she a silent heroine of the empire, or a Machiavellian figure working in the shadows? Although Livia achieved her goal of seeing Tiberius seated on the imperial throne, her relationship with him was deeply fractured. Even before Augustus' death, the bond between mother and son had deteriorated. Livia, with her unbreakable ambition, had shaped Tiberius' path with a mix of pressure, manipulation, and personal sacrifices that he never forgave. She forced him to divorce the woman he loved, pushed him into a public life he never wanted, and, in the end, placed him at the very center of Roman power, a position Tiberius never truly desired. When Augustus died, the Senate wanted to grant Livia every honor, monuments, titles, direct political influence. But the new emperor, Tiberius, began systematically opposing it. He rejected most of the posthumous honors, limited her involvement in public affairs, and gradually excluded her from government decisions. Nevertheless, Livia did not give up her position easily. Now officially, Julia Augusta, Livia maintained her own court, influenced senators and nobles, and did not hesitate to intercede for accused or condemned individuals. This constant intervention, sometimes direct, undermined Tiberius' authority, as he increasingly saw her as a political rival rather than his mother. One of the most tense moments came when the Senate proposed to officially refer to Tiberius not only as son of Augustus, but also as son of Livia, symbolically equating his mother's figure with the founder of the empire. This was a blow to his ego, but also a sign of the powerful shadow Livia continued to cast over Roman politics. Eventually, the estrangement became total. Tiberius voluntarily exiled himself on the island of Capri and stopped seeing his mother altogether. Even when she fell ill years later, the emperor never visited her again. Livia died in 29 CE, without reconciliation, without comfort, and with a son emperor who even refused to organize her funeral with the pomp the Senate demanded. After her death in 29 CE, Livia Drusilla, now known as Julia Augusta, fell into an official silence imposed by her own son. Tiberius, still burdened with resentment, vetoed all posthumous honors the Senate wished to grant her. He did not allow her deification, prohibited her apotheosis, and did not even attend her funeral. It was his successor, Caligula, who delivered the funeral speech in his place. However, fate had an unexpected vindication prepared. Years later, her grandson Claudius, the one Livia had despised, humiliated, and marginalized for his physical disabilities, ascended the imperial throne. Against all odds, Claudius was the one who publicly restored his grandmother's image. He ordered her official deification, honored her as Diva Augusta, and commanded the erection of statues, temples, and altars in her name. In public games, her image paraded alongside that of Augustus, as if time itself had rewritten history. Many Roman women became her priestesses, and her spiritual influence spread across the empire, far beyond her death. Livia was not only the first Empress of Rome, she was the political mother of an entire dynasty. Through her maneuvers, her lineage controlled power for decades. Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero were, directly or indirectly, products of her ambition and her family networks. Her figure became a symbol of female power, strategic intelligence, and the ability to influence from the shadows in a male-dominated society. Over the centuries, her life has been portrayed in novels, films, and series, such as I, Claudius or Domina, always shrouded in an aura of ambiguity between admiration and suspicion. She was, without a doubt, a woman ahead of her time, austere in her public image, relentless in her private actions, and eternally present in the foundations of the Roman Empire. Livia Drusilla was not only the first Empress of Rome. She was the silent architect of a legacy that marked imperial history for more than half a century. Her name, though hidden in the shadow of the men who ruled, still shines as a legendary, complex, and fascinating figure.